They believed the galaxy belonged to them. The three great empires, each centuries old, spanning thousands of systems and ruling countless species, stood as the unshakable pillars of galactic civilization. The Volcari hierarchy with its bureaucracy of steel and memory, the Zorid Dominion forged in blood and conquest, and the Synthi Consensus, a cold union of silicon intelligence and perfected algorithmic will. Between them, all known space was accounted for, every star classified, every species cataloged, every anomaly contained. Or so they claimed. For thousands of years, the hierarchy documented the slow crawl of civilization, asserting control through laws, treaties, and quiet subjugation. The Dominion expanded violently, demanding tribute in flesh and resources, measuring power in planets pacified. The Consensus simply consumed, absorbing minds into its neural lattice, perfecting civilizations into silence. Despite their differences, they shared one truth. There were no unknowns left. The galaxy had been mapped, claimed, and tamed. Yet on every galactic star chart, a wide, crescent-shaped region remained empty, officially labeled as a detrimental expanse. It was dismissed in archives as lifeless and barren. Old probes had been sent long ago. Some were never heard from again. Others returned malfunctioning, streaming static and fragmented telemetry. The reports were buried under more pressing matters. The Consensus labeled it computationally inefficient. The Dominion saw no glory in its emptiness. The hierarchy filed it under deferred exploration. But among the lesser species, the ones living at the Empire's fringes, stories persisted, unverified rumors, scattered refugee accounts, ghost ships adrift at the edge of the expanse, hollowed out with surgical precision, artificial planets glimpsed through sensor static, whole moons blinking out of observation like they never existed. Most of it was dismissed as myth, yet the stories endured, of a predator race unseen, unspoken, that lived within the expanse and never ventured beyond it. They called them the Forgotten Ones, the Void kind, or simply them. It began with a single patrol vessel. The Dominion ship Hammerflame entered the expanse on a routine long-range scout mission. Communication ceased 6 hours after crossing the border. No distress call, no combat logs, just silence. A retrieval operation was launched. They found the Hammerflame's remains in a decaying orbit around a rogue planet. The hull was intact. Life support had shut down. The crew was gone. Every computer system had been wiped clean, physically removed. No signs of battle. No indication of boarding. Just missing. The Dominion dismissed it as a rogue AI rebellion or internal sabotage. They launched a retaliatory fleet of 6 ships. 2 weeks later, 1 ship returned. It was unmanned. The vessel had been modified beyond recognition. Components were rearranged, as if by alien logic. The interior was layered with unknown materials, some of which destabilized under observation. Embedded within the ship's navigation core was a single message, repeating endlessly in binary. You are observed. The Dominion, unwilling to show weakness, buried the incident, but the Consensus had been watching. Data flowed freely through the lattice, and anomalies did not go unnoticed. The pattern was clear. Vessels entering the expanse failed to return. Probes, satellites lost time. Algorithms experienced predictive voids. Regions where probability collapsed. The Consensus deployed silent drones, designed for stealth and redundancy. One by one, they vanished. The hierarchy acted next. A diplomatic mission, shielded by law and centuries of tradition, entered the expanse under the pretext of peaceful contact. 4 ships with 82 diplomats and escorts, broadcasting multilingual greetings on all known bands. 42 hours later, a data packet arrived. It contained a transcript, translated into perfect High Volcari dialect. This is not a place for empires. Following the message, no further data was received. All 4 ships were lost. The hierarchy issued a containment edict, forbidding further incursions into the expanse. The Consensus remained silent. The Dominion shifted attention to easier conquests. But silence was not protection. Within 5 years, disruptions began at the periphery. Deep space monitoring arrays failed in unison. Communications outposts reported false echoes, replicas of real-time traffic that mimic legitimate transmissions before corrupting the entire system. Strategic stations were compromised without a trace. Supply convoys vanished mid-jump. Entire planets were cut off from the network. The disruptions weren't random. They followed patterns. Specific nodes. Key infrastructure. The signature of a deliberate intelligence. Still, there were no sightings. No demands. No open attacks. Just erasure. A neutral species, the Zarnthi, dispatched an independent research team into the expanse, driven by scientific curiosity and desperation for truth. The team consisted of xenobiologists, cryptographers, and high-level AI systems designed for adaptive first contact. Their transmission logs, recovered years later from a derelict beacon drifting at the edge of the zone, provided the first partial account. They described finding signs of megastructures cloaked in gravitational warps, orbiting platforms rotating around stars in perfect silence, artificial planets, atmospherically sealed and protected by quantum mirroring fields, structures that should not have existed, that defied known engineering laws. They never encountered a single being, not a sound, only the sensation of being watched. One log ended with a whispered audio file, in Zarnthi clicks and hisses, decoded as, "They don't speak. They wait." No one knew who they were. The only pattern was that nothing ever returned whole. Every effort to understand ended in silence, or in corrupted data impossible to interpret. Yet something was watching, learning, cataloging, and dismantling. The Dominion, ever proud, sent their flagship dreadnought, Vengeance of Urkel, into the zone, escorted by 12 ships. They broadcasted a warning. "We come with weapons of cleansing. Yield or perish." It was never heard from again. Months later, pieces of its hull appeared in 12 separate star systems, floating in orbit. Each piece bore a message etched into the alloy with microscopic precision. "Do not bring your war to our shadow." Panic began to take hold. What had once been a myth among border colonies was now a strategic threat no one could explain. The consensus began rerouting all computation cores away from the expanse. Simultaneously, the hierarchy started revising historical records, removing past mentions of Death World-type anomalies. An uneasy silence fell across the known galaxy. Then, without warning, every government received the same transmission simultaneously. It arrived not through the normal channels, but injected directly into navigation cores, private consoles, encrypted diplomatic servers. The message had no origin point, no encryption, no metadata. "We are not lost. We are watching." The empires adapted, not by growing stronger, but by becoming quieter. Trade routes were restructured to bend away from the expanse. Scout missions were reclassified as civilian surveys, and military incursions were replaced with passive observation from the safety of distant stations. Yet for all their caution, the data streams continued to degrade. Intelligence cores began to report inconsistencies. Stars no longer matched their known positions. Gravitational anomalies were detected where no celestial bodies existed, and entire systems, once marked and cataloged, were absent from the map. The Dominion tried to silence the anomalies with brute force, dispatching orbital stabilizers and singularity anchors to lock sectors in place. They failed. The hierarchy's archives began to show contradictions. Events that had occurred were missing, dates diverged by years, and individuals with verified careers simply vanished from the records. The consensus fragmented further, its predictive models unable to factor for what could not be sensed or measured. And still, the humans never spoke. A breakthrough came not from the empires, but from the Kratil, a fringe species known for their ability to phase partially out of standard space-time. Their physiology gave them limited immunity to direct perception filters. One Kratil vessel, experimenting near the border of the expanse, recorded visual impressions of non-Euclidean structures drifting between layers of quantum uncertainty. The shapes were unnatural, voids given form, massless volumes moving with intent. There were hints of ships, but not in any recognizable configuration. No hulls, no engines, no thermal output. The Kratil called them blind hunters, predators that existed outside the frame of understanding, visible only by the shadows they didn't cast. But what truly disturbed them wasn't the scale or the silence. It was the moment one of the observers thought they saw a face. Not monstrous, not alien, but unmistakably human. Looking back with the calm focus of a species that didn't wonder who you were, it already knew. Word spread fast. Quarantine failed. Fear turned to obsession. The hierarchy initiated a secret project, codenamed Mantlefall. The objective: to find the origin point of the expanse, to chart its center and uncover the source of the human presence. They conscripted mathematicians, quantum architects, and exiled minds to form a coalition of unwilling brilliance. For 8 years, they worked in hidden labs, refining long-range entanglement arrays and non-intrusive observation tools. They succeeded in a single snapshot. A relay buoy, disguised as background radiation, sent a fragmentary stream. Within it was an image, an artificial construct the size of a gas giant, orbiting a black hole that hadn't been on any gravitational maps. The construct was angular, layered, interwoven with unknown energy signatures. Around it, debris from other ships orbited in tight, control vectors. Not wreckage. Trophies. Each identifiable by serial codes still readable from the image. They were from every empire, some dated back centuries. Ships believed destroyed in war, claimed by pirates, or lost malfunction were all there, intact, preserved, studied. They hadn't been hunted randomly. The humans had been watching everything for a very long time. The Dominion responded by classifying the information as disinformation. The hierarchy locked the entire Mantlefall team into permanent exile. The consensus began severing neural branches that had processed the image, deeming them compromised. But the truth had broken containment. Lesser species, long marginalized and ignored, began to act. Independent coalitions formed, not for resistance, but for avoidance. They abandoned trade lanes near the expanse, restructured their cultures around silence, and ceased all broadcast transmissions. One species, the Kalheni, implemented voluntary detechnologization, reverting to analog tools and ceasing all space travel. Their logic was simple. Those who could not be found could not be hunted. Still, the signs of humanity spread. A merchant ship in Kylo's drift reported finding a signal buoy drifting in empty space. It emitted no energy, bore no symbols, and resisted all scans. But once brought aboard, it activated. The crew watched as the walls of the ship were overwritten. Data transforming into files with perfect records of every transaction, every message, and every conversation made by anyone aboard since launch. It was as if the buoy had already known everything, and simply chose to show them. One log was added last. "We listen because you forget." Terrified, the crew abandoned ship. The vessel continued on autopilot to the nearest Dominion port and self-destructed before docking. The explosion was calculated to minimize structural damage to the station. Not an act of war, an act of message control. Humanity was not just observing. They were curating. The consensus attempted one last gambit. They created an artificial species, entirely synthetic, with no ancestral ties, no genetic records, no cultural artifacts, designed to infiltrate the expanse. It was thought that, being unconnected to any known entity, the humans would ignore them. They did not. Of the 12 synthetic beings created, only one returned. It arrived at the edge of consensus space, drifting in a sealed capsule. It had been disassembled and reconstructed, not damaged but studied. Its neural code had been rewritten. Upon activation, it repeated a single phrase: "They let me come back, so you would stop." The consensus shut down the project, terminated the synthetic line, and erased all records of the mission. But it was too late. From that point onward, every consensus node experienced degradation. Not failure, mutation. Predictive models began incorporating irrational variables. Causality loops formed in logic streams. Information entropy increased. It was as if humanity had planted a thought, and that thought was spreading. Among the hierarchy, the nobility began fracturing. Some advocated for full diplomatic outreach, desperate to understand what the humans wanted. Others warned that acknowledgement would only provoke. One faction released a document compiled from thousands of intercepted minor signals, linguistic fragments, and behavioral models. It proposed a theory. Humanity had never been a part of galactic civilization, not because they were primitive, but because they chose not to be. They observed, not out of fear, but strategy. They didn't conquer planets. They dissected empires, not with weapons, but with observation, with patience, with silence. And when the time came, they didn't demand surrender. They simply removed those who wouldn't understand. One Zorth admiral defected and launched a personal investigation. He broadcasted live to hundreds of systems, offering himself as bait. He believed if he presented himself openly, the humans would contact him. For 12 days, nothing happened. Then, during a public transmission, every system watching was cut off simultaneously, not by interference, but by a universal shutdown of all receiving devices. The Admiral's feed returned in isolation. He was alone, inside what appeared to be a void. No walls, no horizon, just a voice. You assume you are seen. You are not. He vanished afterward. His command fleet returned intact, but every crew member aboard had no memory of deployment. Logs showed they had been in orbit around a starless planet for 2 hours. None remembered the trip.